Are they really going to blame Trump for the shoot-down by Iran of a civilian airliner? Looks like we may have isolated the virus of Trump derangement syndrome. Also, Epstein tapes are gone forever, and you're not supposed to notice or care. Pelosi's non-strategy strategy, and the Dow breaks 29,000. That and more coming up.
We caught a total monster, and we took him out, and that should have happened a long time ago. We did it because they were looking to blow up our embassy. We also did it for other reasons that were very obvious. Somebody died. One of our military people died. People were badly wounded just a week before, and we did it. And we had a shot at him, and I took it, and that shot was pinpoint accurate, and that was the end of a monster.
Welcome to the Buck Sexton Show. You would think that now that the specter of imminent war, if you're a reasonable person, had passed, you would probably think, well, hold on a sec. Hold on a minute. Can't we now rally around the defense of the nation? Can't our first concern become the continued defense of U.S. interests in the Middle East and here at home as well? Aren't there some things that are truly bipartisan? That would be a normal response at this point. There's no reasonable way to think, way to come to the conclusion that we are about to fall into the midst of a war with Iran. That's not going to happen. There's a debate about war powers now, and that will be interesting intellectually, but I can tell you right now it will change nothing. But we often talk on this show about how crazy the libs are. In fact, that would be something of a mantra here. The libs are crazy. And I use that term not just derisively, although that's certainly part of it. I try to do it, I try to use it, to utilize it as well as a diagnosis of sorts, as much as I can. I'm obviously not a medical professional, nor do I play one on radio. Only when producer Mark asks me for special old-fashioned Irish cold remedies, which usually involve alcohol warmed up. But in general, I do try to take an analytic approach to just how crazy the libs are. You know, what is this a normal political dispute, or is this something that shows that the elevator's not going to the top floor with a lot of these folks? And we have, in some ways, right now, seen what I have to say is the most stunning incidents of Trump derangement syndrome that I can really recall. And there is stiff competition in that realm. That's really amazing. You have the president getting Iran to blink. When was the last time any U.S. president in your lifetime made a decision that the Iranians backed down from and looked bad as a result of in this way? It's been a long time, and maybe some of you are saying, oh, Reagan, but it's been a very, very long time. And so now we have a circumstance where, in the immediate aftermath of a strike like this, on Qasem Soleimani, there was this concern that perhaps we're going to go into a full-out war situation. That's clearly not happening, not even close to happening. We haven't even suffered any attacks with casualties. But there was major loss of life the night that Iran, they say, retaliated. I think you could also call it escalation. Now you get into the who, in this tit-for-tat with Iran that's been going on for decades, who is in fact really the instigator here? Was the instigation the Iranians backing a militia that killed an American contractor and wounded other servicemen? Was the instigation the Iranians bringing down a U.S. drone or seizing ships in the Strait of Hormuz in violation of international law? The Iranians had a press conference earlier this week where the flags of various terrorist groups were behind the Iranian officials because they are the funding arm of many of the worst actors in the Middle East. I mean, there are some Sunni extremists that Iran fights against right now, but that's really just a question of who gets to have power and influence in the region. There's ideological hatreds that sometimes override even their hatred of Israel as the little Satan and America as the great Satan. And the jihadist enterprise, such as it is, can be put into a secondary role temporarily because they're fighting each other. That does happen on occasion. The Iranians have been fighting, for example, against the Islamic State in Syria, but that's a function of just competing interests. It's not that the Iranians it's not that they oppose ISIS because they're bad guys. It's they're not their bad guys, and they want to be in charge. But you saw what happened this week, and all of the prognostications out there about how this was going to lead to imminent war, how this was going to get out of control. There was no way that we'd be able to come back from this. We were on the brink. All of those people saying that were wrong. It was not accurate. Did not happen. I think, especially, if you go back and watch the conversation that I had with the ladies on the couch of Outnumbered earlier this week, everything that I said was, I think, spot on. I'm not trying to give myself a pat on the back. That's what producer Mark is for when I'm being particularly astute. But nonetheless, I do think that there was, I think that people that were listening to me were in a good place to understand the events of the week, and people that were listening to the hysterics out there, Democrats and even some Republicans, and there are these, certainly the never Trump voices that are really just stealth Democrats, but there are some that are still supportive of President Trump who are willing to take the oppositional narrative on this whole incident. And then things got completely crazy. Then we've reached a new level. This is somewhat of a reminder for me when, you had that initial allegation against Kavanaugh this will make sense in a sec, by Christine Blasey Ford. And you could say, okay, she has no proof. She has no evidence. Her story doesn't hold up. She doesn't remember things. It's very convenient. She's lied about other things, afraid of travel, had to have a second door in her house. She's clearly a, kind of, at best, a little disturbed and zany. And then by the time we got through that whole debacle, there at the end were people who were trying to pretend that it was somehow feasible that Brett Kavanaugh was part of a gang rape crew in high school that just went from party to party gang raping teenage girls. That was the accusation that was being forwarded by Democrats, and that was on the record, and the person who said it is an insane liar. But at that, the good news at least was that then it was clear that this was just a smear campaign. This was an effort to just tear him down at any cost, and they overreached. The libs, because of their Trump derangement syndrome, the libs overreached there. In that case, I guess it was Kavanaugh derangement syndrome, but same idea. They've overreached again, my friends. You might be thinking, how would it be possible, given what we have seen, for the libs? There's no U.S. loss of life in response to his action. There's now additional sanctions, but also the opening of a respectful dialogue if Iran is willing to start acting like a normal country. This is how you change things, by doing things differently than they've been done in the past. Nothing could be more obvious than that, and yet we've had multiple administrations fail to put that into action, fail to understand that basic maxim. And so now what do the libs do? You cannot make this up. This may be the most insane thing that has been the most insane narrative that we have seen yet from them. The claim is that because Iran, almost certainly now, there's some people saying, well, we have to wait for the investigation to happen, but they shot a plane out of the sky. Okay, that is what happened. Why? We'll find out. Was it a human error? Was it, did the system malfunction? How could they do something so catastrophically, horrifically incompetent? Let's be honest. This was an accident. I don't believe the Iranians wanted to do this. I know there are conspiracies out there about, well, who was on the plane? But you might think that this would clearly be blamed on the Iranians. There's no way that liberals could find some means to say that this was Donald Trump's fault, right? But if you thought that, you would be wrong, my friends. Oh, yes. Across the media and even some Democrat candidates for office now, because the Iranians shot a plane out of their own sky, with a lot of Iranians on board the plane, by the way, because they did that in the course of a heightened period of hostilities that they claim Trump created by taking out Qasem Soleimani. It is therefore, according to the libs, according to the media, Trump's fault that you had over 100 civilians killed here in this plane that was shot down by the Iranians. This is completely bonkers. I mean, this is absolutely next level insane. We have, for example, and it's American media, international media, other people. Trump is the primary enemy for all of them, so it doesn't matter what the Iranians did. It's much more important to find some way to put the blame here at the feet of Donald Trump himself. That's the single most important thing that they're trying to accomplish. Always. I mean, we have, I'm going to go through some of the examples here. Here's the CBC reporter raising this as a possible. Play 18.
I think a significant question that Canadians, particularly the families of these victims, are going to have is, are 63 Canadians dead because of the unintended consequences of a decision made by the U.S. president?
Are 63 people dead because of what Trump did? Canadians, by the way. It's over 176 killed on that flight. This is Trump's fault now. This is what they're saying. The Iranians blew a plane out of their own sky while engaged in an act of war, not just against us, but against the Iraqis as well. Remember, they fired missiles into Iraqi airspace, onto Iraqi soil, threatening Iraqi soldiers to have some show of force against us. No one made them do this. This was their choice. This was their decision and their incredible, horrific stupidity. And it's Trump's fault. And if you think, why Buck? Why Buck? If you think that it's just some random CBC reporter, one of the top Democratic candidates for office, Mayor Pete Buttigieg, shared this one yesterday. I mean, it's like they all just get some memo. Let's go full crazy. Let's go full Trump derangement syndrome. Innocent civilians are now dead, Pete Buttigieg wrote, because they were caught in the middle of an unnecessary and unwanted military tit-for-tat. My thoughts are with the families and the loved ones of all 176 souls lost aboard this flight. It wasn't a tit-for-tat. We weren't firing at them. We weren't in the midst of... No. Hold on a second. I don't think so. Not getting away with this. The big word you were seeing last night across media, just if you want, do a search on Facebook or Twitter. You'll see it come up all over the place. Crossfire. These people were caught in the crossfire. No. They weren't caught in the crossfire. The 176 people who died on that plane were caught in the Iranians being psychotic morons. It's not Trump's fault. If this is Trump's fault, everything is Trump's fault. But perhaps then we've gone to what really is going on here. Everything is. For liberals, everything is Trump's fault. This is Trump derangement syndrome. If we have isolated, when you're trying to find what exactly a virus is, you take it down all the way to the single cell level, cellular level of or a single instance, I should say, single copy of a virus. You isolate that virus. You know what it is. We have isolated Trump derangement syndrome here. This is it at its core. People have been so conditioned to hate this president, to hate what's going, to hate all the new stock market high. We're not fighting big wars. We're not doing it. We took far more casualties in wars under Bush and Obama in the first 4 years they had in office, respectively, than we are taking under this president. Not even close, not even comparable. So you have to ask the question, at what point is this all just being done in bad faith? And I can't assess the faith of the opposition to Trump because I can't assess their sanity. This is absurd. It's Trump's fault. This is the implication that keeps being made. I'm trying to find more of the CROSSFIRE stuff. You cannot make this stuff up. It's completely and utterly insane. I don't even know how we're supposed to take these people seriously. Even Tom Nichols, who finds a way to always think that Trump is terrible. Like everything Trump does is horrible. Trump is so bad that Mr. Nichols, who's now built a career of being an anti-Trump conservative, whatever. I think he's now officially a Democrat, though. But he loves conservatism so much that he'll work with Democrats to destroy it. That's his position. He would argue with that, but it's not really up for debate. He wants to help the other side. He wants to defeat the Republican Party. He wants to defeat conservative ideas and values in practice and in policy. But he even shared this. As a major sufferer, he's being facetious here, and one of the true patient zeros of Trump derangement syndrome, let me tell the rest of you that it does not strengthen our case about Trump if you're going to blame him for every bad thing in the world. Yeah. When you've lost Tom Nichols when it comes to Trump derangement syndrome, you're really in another universe of crazy. But this is where it is. And it's also why the analysis, if they're willing to do this, you have to remember the analysis that they were offering up all week was always tainted by this notion that it's most important. The most important thing is, in fact, to get at Trump. More important than war and peace, more important than matters of life and death. The people who make a living, who devote their lives, who wake up every day, and what they're trying to do, they say, is bring you the truth and bring you information. The single most important thing to them is that there's a way to attack Donald Trump here. That was true in the moments leading up to the Iranians firing missiles at us. It was true in the days before that when Qasem Soleimani was killed, and it's true now. Everything comes through that prism. Everything is done through that lens. We have to remember that. We have isolated the virus of Trump derangement syndrome, and it is an ugly, scary thing.
Mr. Secretary, the administration said this strike was done based on an imminent threat. But this morning, you said we didn't know precisely when and we didn't know precisely where. That's not the definition of imminent. The president has also suggested that there was some sort of attack being planned against an embassy, perhaps several embassies. Can you clarify? Did you have specific information about an imminent threat, and did it have anything to do with our embassies?
We had specific information on an imminent threat, and those threat stream included attacks on U.S. embassies. Period. Full stop.
So you were mistaken when you said you didn't know precisely when and you didn't know precisely where.
Nope, completely true. Those are completely consistent thoughts. I don't know exactly which minute. We don't know exactly which day it would have been executed, but it was very clear. Qasem Soleimani himself was plotting a broad, large-scale attack against American interests, and those attacks were imminent.
Against an embassy?
Against American facilities, including American embassies, military bases, American facilities throughout the region.
All right, let's dive into this timeline dispute that's going on right now. All right, so here's the other game the media is playing. Right, on the one hand, maybe it's Trump's fault that the Iranians shot this plane out of the sky, because if we hadn't been so mean to Qasem Soleimani, they wouldn't have had to do this. But they didn't have to do this at all. They made a choice, and they messed up. That's on them, right? If we were responding to the Iranians seizing a ship, an oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz, for example, and we just happened to drop a nuke on Tehran by accident, would that be Iran's fault for us messing up? Whoops. Sorry, that ICBM, somebody hit the button. This is really what's offered to you by your so-called intellectual journalist class. The people that think that Trump is such a horrible person and such a moron, they make this argument and they keep a straight face while they do it. CNN's national security analyst, I don't know if she was at Lawfare, I don't know, whatever. Susan Hennessy, she's one of these completely deranged anti-Trumpers. She's making this case yesterday, all about the crossfire. Oh, these people got caught in the crossfire. No. When one side is shooting at another side, there's one side shooting. And when someone hits somebody else, the side that's getting shot at is not part of that crossfire, okay? We're not shooting back at them. This was a one-way ticket, one-way mission. Iranians coming after us. But now they keep drilling into the timeline. And I saw this morning when Pompeo was holding his press conference, they're asking, oh, well, but was it really imminent? And how imminent was it? Do you remember any journalists grilling, let's say, Jay Carney? We used to call him Smarmy Smurf back in the day, if you remember, for the original Saturday Squad. Do you remember journalists drilling Jay Carney on, or drilling, same thing, close enough, on the truth of how imminent an attack was when there was a drone strike ordered by President Obama, and Obama was very clear that he was signing off on these strikes personally. This was not a thing left to the generals or left. Obama was signing off on these strikes in Pakistan and in Yemen. There were articles written about this. He was open. He talked about it. He made jokes about, using the drones. I forget when it was at some dinner. And, he said, boys better stay away from my daughters. And then he made some joke about, ordering drone strikes. So, I mean, this was, he was like the drone guy. That was his big contribution to strategy. And as we know, drones are a tactic. I mean, this would be like saying I'm the let's use snipers against the enemy guy. Okay, but it's not enough on its own, is it? But do you remember the press grilling Jay Carney on Anwar al-Awlaki's imminent threat that required him to be hit with a drone strike, such that also a 16-year-old, he was a U.S. citizen, Anwar al-Awlaki, and a 16-year-old U.S. citizen, his son, was also killed in that strike. Now, I'm not crying any tears for Anwar al-Awlaki, but I'm just trying to point. I mean, the guy was scum, and it was a good thing we took him out. But I can also feel that way about Qasem Soleimani, and yet we sit here and we hear from the journalists that now they want to do their jobs. They cannot take the position that they have principles late in the game when it benefits them politically and expect us to believe that they really have principles. That's not the same thing. They have convenience. They have opportunism. They do not have principles. And on this notion of the timeline, what would be an acceptable thing for Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, to say in response to this grilling this morning? I mean, what was he really supposed to do? They insist that there must be some malfeasance here on the part of the administration. But instead of just dealing with the fact that you're not hearing any voices from the intelligence community yet that have disagreed with this, they say, well, why should we, this was the question that was being posed this morning, why should we believe you now, meaning you, the administration, when you say we had this intelligence, when you have said the intelligence community was wrong on other things? Okay, well, we can play this game all day. Why should you ever believe the intelligence community then? Journos? Why should you ever think that the U.S. government is telling the truth? First of all, the U.S. government was wrong about Russia collusion and Trump at the very highest level, as we know from what we've seen from the FBI and the CIA and these other places. But is that now an excuse to ignore everything they say? Oh, no. It's just an excuse when you want it to be. It's an excuse now because it's useful for attacking Trump. But it's not okay for the president to question clearly politically motivated leaks and attacks on him from within the intelligence community, meant to destroy his presidency, by the way. He can't do that without them now coming back and saying, well, hold on, he objected to that effort. So if he objects to the deep state coup going on in the federal bureaucracy against him, he cannot now turn around and say, the information presented to me from that federal bureaucracy indicated Qasem Soleimani was a threat. I mean, he can't win is the point here. It doesn't matter what he does, what he says. They hate him. They hate him. I think in large part, I mean, there's so many reasons. I mean, you could really just write a book on, maybe I should do that, just really do a book on Trump derangement syndrome and lay out the case that these people are completely insane. It's just also, a lot of this doesn't even matter enough for them to care as much as they do. None of these little journos, they're not getting drafted. Their lives aren't being ruined by Trump. I mean, they love to just cry and whine about this all the time. But it's because they are operating in this echo chamber. They're operating in this journalism culture where the more woke you are, the more revered you are by your peers. And the height of wokeness is really hating Trump. There's nothing more woke than hating Trump. Everything else fits in beneath that. But he is the great threat to them. And one of the amazing things that Trump has done for all of us is to really clarify who these people are. And the media is never going to recover, by the way. We're never going back. For those who are reasonable observers of what happens with the national news media in this country, what has been happening, we're never going back to that period where, if you're just a casual watcher of news or reader of newspapers or websites, you think, the media tries to be, they're not perfect, but they try to be pretty honest and fair. And we're never going back to that. It's never going to happen because it was never true. But now we know it's not true. And it's a combination of social media giving us a window into the minds of these leftist activists all the time. Oh, yeah, They tweet how much they want Trump impeached in the morning, and then in the evening it's, well, I'm just having an honest conversation with no political bias whatsoever on TV. It's total garbage, as you know. But also Trump clarifies who they are. He clarifies who the enemy is for us. We see them. They stand up now. They shriek. They scream. They hate us. They hate Trump. I guess they view those things as one and the same in so many ways. I've been telling you what I think the Trump doctrine is, which is basically doing what is necessary and making sure everyone knows if you kill our people, we will kill you. It's very straightforward. It's actually quite simple. And it's revolutionary in that sense, because what we're used to in foreign policy is a lot of people sitting around using SAT words and trying to out-nuance one another while bad things are happening and while U.S. interests are not being protected and while U.S. citizens and military and personnel are not being protected. Here's the Trumpster making it quite clear. Play 20.
We have this tremendous military, and you know what that is? That's really a great fighting force, but I hope we never have to use it. I really do. You saw an example. You saw an example of that a couple of days ago. So we seek friends, not enemies, but if you dare to threaten our citizens, you do so at your own grave peril.
Meanwhile, you have many different news sites. While the president is speaking with such clarity on this issue, you have news sites referring to a plane crash in Tehran. A plane crash. This was not a plane crash. This is the Iranians shooting a plane out of the sky with a missile. That's not a plane crash. Crossfire, plane crash. These are dishonest. Why are they using these terms? They could call it an alleged missile shoot down if they want, to be proven with further analysis. Oh, wow, this is so funny. Donald Trump Jr. just tweeted this out right before the show a few minutes ago. I just saw this. President Trump's superpower is getting his opposition to show their true colors. Watching the media and Democrats hysterically try to defend the Iranian regime and their actions over decades is not only telling but disgusting. Democrats have become Iran's cheerleaders. I got to say, my favorite meme that I've seen this week that's circulating around is it's pretty amazing. It's the 2020 Democrat presidential primary poll. And somebody made this on Reddit, and it has Pete Buttigieg at 25% with a photo of him, Joe Biden at 15%, Elizabeth Warren 25%, Bernie Sanders 9%, and Qasem Soleimani with 12% of the Democrat vote. Look, I mean, they deserve it. They deserve to be mocked in this way because their position on all this is frankly and flatly absurd, and it's disgraceful. It is completely disgraceful, but here we are. Here we are looking at this issue, and they were holding out for this week to be an opportunity to really stick it to Trump. He's made this huge blunder on Iran. He's made this terrible error, and yet that didn't happen at all. In fact, they have to deal with the disappointment now of the president making a very sound decision, a decision that some would say is among the best of his presidency so far. This can always change. It can turn around. There can be unforeseen blowback or consequences. But if we're going to assess it today, I'm going to tell you how we would assess it today. President Trump, once again, has enraged his enemies with his success. And they have come up with different lies to try and undermine that show just how crazy they are.
On Iran, yesterday, the president confirmed he was focused on de-escalation and defending the American people. Instead of working with the administration to make America stronger, Democrats are working against us to make us weaker. Make no mistake, today's War Powers Resolution cannot become law. By definition, it will never be sent to the president, and it will never limit his constitutional authority to defend the American people. It is a concurrent resolution. This is the type of resolution that we invite the soapbox derby to the Capitol. This is a meaningless vote that only sends the wrong message that the House Democrats would rather stand with the socialist base than stand against Iran.
My favorite thing here is that he's calling them the socialist base. The Democrats are socialists. Let's start to say it. Let's start to be clear about this. Let's not back away from this anymore. Democrats are socialists. Do you want a socialist country? Do you want a socialist America? They are socialists. Let's just let it out. Let's just let it rip. Let it out there. Let's be honest about it. But now on the war powers component of this, does anyone really think this is going to change anything? Oh, and I'm sorry, I left this out. We got to have this. This is Pelosi sounding like, Pelosi might as well be working for like FARS, I think the Iranian state TV, state news agency. Here's Pelosi taking Iran's side. Remember, Iran is a country run by very bad people who do terrible things, okay? Iran is the country where you have no free speech, you have no rights. They hang gay people from cranes so that everybody can see them after they've been brutally murdered. That's what Iran is. But Nancy Pelosi, feels bad for Iran right now. Play clip 17, please, Mark.
The argument would be made that putting the shoe on the other foot, if the United States had a high level, maybe the second most important person in the country, assassinated wherever, the United States might consider that an assault on our country, right? And the Iranians might as well, even though this took place at the Iraqi airport. And so it's foggy. There are those who think, well, it was in Iraq, so it counts. But it was an assault on Iran, so it shouldn't count.
This is the person that the Democrats hold up as the savvy political operator, the grand strategist of the Democratic Party, and is just absurd in her analysis of this. But I'm glad that Nancy Pelosi's out there and willing to take the Iranian side of this a little bit, to do some let's stand in their shoes for a minute analysis. Thanks, Nancy Pelosi. You were really helpful. Thanks, Nancy Pelosi. You're really showing us who you are in all of this. Sarah Sanders is having none of it, by the way. Former White House press secretary. She doesn't like. First of all, she doesn't like this war powers dust up that's going on right now. This is the Congress is asserting its power to declare war after 20 years of abdicating that power on an issue where we're not about to go to war. Trump has made it very clear he doesn't want war. He's not going to go to war. The Iranians would have to force us. Any country could force us into a war with them. That is possible, right? If the leadership of any nation engaged in a mass casualty attack against our people, we'd be at war with that country. So any country can force us into a war. And, we wouldn't stop until that leadership was gone and there was accountability and et cetera, et cetera. But Trump is not trying to push us into a war at all. And the people on the right who are suggesting that that's happening, I think, are also just being really, really hyperbolic about all of it. Here is Sarah Sanders. Play 21, please.
I can't think of anything dumber than allowing Congress to take over our foreign policy. They can't seem to manage to get much of anything done. I think the last thing we want to do is push powers into Congress's hands and take them away from the president. Any Democrat that doesn't understand that America is safer now that one of the most dangerous terrorists in the world is rotting in hell is completely naive and completely misses what we need to have in a foreign policy. And the last thing I want to do is see them take power away from President Trump and put it into their own hands. I don't think anything could be worse for America than that.
Could you imagine giving the power the executive branch has to make decisions and use military force, use lethal force against our enemies? You're gonna run that by committee? You're going to put Congress in charge of the day-to-day of that? Look, Congress has oversight. Congress has power of the purse. Congress writes laws. There are things that Congress can do. And certainly Senate ratifies treaties. There are roles here to be played. But you don't hand over all of that authority to the Congress. And in a situation like this where we have all these non-state actors, keep in mind, it was much less of a concern back in the day that there would be non-state actors who could effectively wage war against us without there being a country for us to declare war on. And that's part of the complexity. I know I've said that they've abdicated their responsibility, but there are layers here. Heaven forbid if I say it. There is actually some nuance in our national security and foreign policy of the last 20 years that we have to deal with because of all the non-state actors like Al-Qaeda. But this noise that's being made over war powers right now, it's just going to turn into that noise. Nothing will change, my friends.